Like and follow if you love horror. Sorry about the lack of posting. I just got COVID. I'm starting to recover. Then why remove the skeleton? Wolf began to teeter on his heels, the rocking motion so common of Orthodox Jewish prayer. He found the subtle flaw in Diana's profile. It skins them carefully and preserves the whole epidermis. It doesn't discard them, rather it tries to save them. Why not pose the victims intact, only removing the organs it wants to experiment with? I've not made a connection, Diana confessed. I currently assume the removal process is just part of soothing itself through ritual. But this doesn't answer why it wants to remove them in the first place. It specifically wants to see the skeletons in the pose. Diana's gears began to grind. Is there anything in mythology that by nature is skeletal? This killer isn't recreating paintings just as simply out of habit. It's like Ronnie said, it's imitating. It's trying to see itself in the painting. It's using the skeletons to match a reflection of itself. This caught Ronnie's attention. He moved over and listened in on Wolf and Diana. You seem so sure of yourself, Wolf said. There are many she that are gaunt and wiry, like a skeleton. Anything made of wood. Diana dove into a case file and was beyond Wolf's line of questioning. Hard wood. She produced a sample of the wooden splinters collected by Miranda. Are there she made of hardwood? There are more things on heaven and earth, Horatio. Wolf examined the case file and seemed very scholarly for a moment, like a man who was used to spending days, if not weeks, huddled over text searching for answers. Or it could be a dryad. Your Shab might have a better answer than that. Before Diana could ask what a Shab was, Jera spoke up. No, I didn't find any traces of... I'm sorry, how did you know what I was? Wolf glanced up from the paper towards the gremlin. Isn't it obvious to everyone? He laughed as Jera sputtered. Sorry, no, Joe Jack warned me before I came in. I was joking. So, what is alive, skeletal, and made of wood? Diana laid out the traits, trying to prevent any punitive action Jera might take against Joe Jack. And obsessed with experimentation, necromancy, and art. Diana's eyes traveled up Wolf's hand to his arm, then his face. She experienced a slight flutter for a moment, but then her scientific mind kept traveling until her gaze landed on Wolf's yarmulke. Wait, what about a golem? They're made of clay, right? Could they be made of wood too? Wolf shrugged a little bit but shook his head. Yes and no. It depends on the legend. For instance, Reb Yehuda crafted a golem in Prague out of mud and very specific gemstones. But you have to understand that once it was created as a golem, it was essentially a soulless human. No one would have been able to tell it was a created thing. But I suppose you could create a golem out of anything. Just understand that after creation it isn't wood or clay or mud any longer. For all intents, it's alive. He said that said, things that are animated magically can be stopped using similar methods to what you would use to end a golem. Alright, let's not take it off the table for now. We can't assume anything about it. Diana had helplessly locked eyes with Wolf and wasn't sure if it was inappropriate. Eye contact made her deeply uncomfortable. Wolf seemed equally unsure of what to do about this. Too many variables, Ronnie finally chimed in. It tells us nothing about the motivation of how it's choosing its victims. It tells us more than you know, Wolf dissented quickly. This monster of yours is experimenting with life and death. Its habits of reconstructing paintings is not unrelated. What are the visual arts except for a study of the human form? Your creature doesn't want to imitate life. It wants to be alive. For a moment, Ronnie looked as though he was about to get into it with Wolf. Instead, he wagged a finger at Wolf as he made a connection. You've got a good point. Ronnie leaned over the case file. It also tells us how long it's been experimenting. We've had nothing like this come up in recent history. All of a sudden, bam, 2 mass murders only a week apart. The first time, it didn't complete the painting. One Vic got away and took her own life, and none of the clothing matched. The only reason the Vics didn't escape is because of the snowstorm the night of their murders. A freak squall total whiteout for 8 hours. This time, It was prepared and specifically chose the Vix based on the painting it wanted to create. No one got away. We aren't hearing about any similar mass murders, Diane said, because Grand Pines was its first time. Wolf smiled. Not just the first time, an awakening. Ronnie pulled up the dossier on the Grand Pines incident. There was an estate collection of displays on the Grand Pines exhibition lodge. Fine wood crafts, a series of rare wood prints, several wooden sculptures, fine wood furniture, and a collection of wooden posing dummies. Posing dummies? You mean the type artists use to plan paintings? Diana asked, more rhetorically. I think you two are missing the obvious, Wolf said. Care to enlighten me? Ronnie wasn't sure if he liked Wolf or wanted to punch him. What is a human skeleton except for our own inner posing dummy? It wants to see itself in the painting so it can see a reflection of itself alive. Wolf gave the fact a moment to set in. I'd ask, why be so careful removing the bones? Why so delicately preserve the skin? You think it wants to wear the skin? Ronnie asked, realizing where Wolf was heading. All right, that's a new one. Not that new. Ed Gain, Buffalo Bill, Leatherface. Joe Jack cut in with his usual media-washed references. At least one was real this time. You do know two of those are fictional, Ronnie asked. Diana struggled to make the connections or even understand how her colleagues had come to it. It was deeply important for her profiling to understand these things. If I may, why do you believe it wants to wear the skin? She asked. For the same reason it's experimenting with life and tries to pose the skeletons as alive, Wolf responded, without actually answering. Ronnie rolled his eyes. Its habits are all interconnected. It removes the bones to access the skin and meat. Then naturally the skin dries up and dies. It experiments with the organs to try and figure out how to keep the body alive. Because it can't figure it out, it reassembles the bones like posing dummies to try and imagine its own connection to life. If this thing was a posing dummy at some point and is now trying to be alive, then all it understands about life is from art, Ronnie explained. We need to find out what estate those dummies came from. It might tell us how it's choosing its victims. Wolf nodded. Not just that, but if we find out whose estate it came from, we can also find out its history, where it came from, and possibly even who created it. Besides, I was thinking about how boring that sounded and realized it'd be a great way to occupy your neutral, Wolf said. That's a good idea. Miranda raised her voice from her office. It was a wonder to Wolf and Diana how she heard them from the distance. For Ronnie, it was just business as usual. All right, our normie friend will find the estate and see what he can dig up for our UP. Ronnie took the lead, grabbing his jacket and dialing up Agent Giuliani. On the ride to the estate, Wolf and Diana and Ronnie rode together in silence. Ahead of them, Joe Jack and Agent Giuliani with... Let's just start that whole paragraph over. On the ride to the estate, Wolf, Diana, and Ronnie rode together in silence. Ahead of them, Jira's van blasted Megadeth with Joe Jack and Agent Giuliani within. Diana wanted to bridge conversation with Wolf, but didn't even know where to start. She found herself admiring a man she knew little about and didn't know how to approach. It felt odd to her. Instead, almost as if for practice, she focused her attention on Ronnie. Back at the dance academy, she said, uncertain of how to proceed without offending. You seem to just know where the servant's access was. Was that some kind of magic? What do you want me to say, Saperstein? Ronnie smiled. I listened to the wind. I followed a moth. Diana was at a loss for words and glanced at Wolf out of the corner of her eye. I'm kidding. Ronnie's smile widened. My father tells me where hidden rooms are. Is your dad a ghost? Diana didn't want to seem like a child, but was frustrated enough about playing catch-up on these things without having to interrupt Ronnie's meaning. Ronnie laughed hard, guffawing long enough that he had to pull his shades off and wipe his eyes. Of a sorts, but he was